Okay, guys, welcome back. So I guess another thing ran a little bit longer, so break ran a little bit long, but I don't think too many of you are too upset about that. All right, so let's go through and talk a little bit about example runtime errors and exceptions and stuff like that. All right, let's see. Here we are. Okay, so I've put a class out there for you to have a look at that is example runtime errors. So you can see what are some examples of things that would generate runtime errors on their own. Just this is not us throwing an exception. This is just an example of how a normal runtime error might have occurred before we had this whole exceptions discussion. Okay, so I've created a couple of methods, a couple of void methods, error 1, error 2, and error 3. Okay. Now, error 2 and error 3 are both going to be the same thing, right? They're both going to result in the same exception, but for different reasons. Okay. So basically, we're printing out an example piece of text. Then we're going to have some error conditions here. We should only see this if the above lines are commented. So the only way that this should run completely is if I do this, comment those out. All right, so I build that. I'm gonna run my code and all right, so now both pieces of text get there. Okay, now let's uncomment all of them. Compile. Notice compiling is just fine. And when I go to run it, I'm going to print, this is an example, that's this line here, right? And then I'm going to get an exception in thread main. So I'm going to get an exception, all right? Where did I get an exception? Right here, right? So I tried to do a divide by 0. What's the type of exception I got? An arithmetic exception. Okay, so I got an arithmetic exception. The message is divide by 0. I tried to divide by 0. Okay. So notice what happens. It gives me the call stack. Notice here. So this is where the exception occurred. It was thrown inside of this line. This is the line that generated the exception, right? It wasn't caught in this method, so it was sent up to here. And this is the line in here where the exception was thrown. It was not caught in here, and so it ended the program. Okay. So if we comment out that, say, okay, I'm going to get rid of that runtime error. Now if I run, I got another runtime error. All right. So this is another example of a runtime error. Notice that here, all right, this did not create the error. I created an array of size 0. I did not, didn't create a runtime error. But this did. Why? Because I tried to index it at an index that does not exist, right? Why did I create an array of size 0? Specifically because I was trying intentionally to create a runtime error. Okay, so those of you who are for the odd student numbers, this was one way you could have done this. Okay. All right. Okay, so get rid of that. Compile it. And run. And I get yet another runtime error. Right. This time I said, okay, I'm going to create an array of size 1, so I won't get this. This won't create an error. But now I indexed it at a negative thing, or I could have done it at a 1, either one, right? But notice the error message that I get. Index -1 out of bounds for length 1. What was the previous one? index 0 out of bounds for length 0. Okay. So negative index. These are just 3 possible examples of how you could have created a runtime error situation. Now, there is another way that we could get to this line. Error 3, what we could do is we could say, okay, let's do this. Let's put it all inside of a big try block, right? Well, actually, well, let's do this. That's fine. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to catch. I want to catch. What was the arithmetic exception? Catch my arithmetic exception. And I'm going to have to import it. I'm going to have to import it to do this. I'm just going to import them all. I know I say don't do the star thing. Actually, I won't do it. Okay, so I'm going to import that. I'm going to import that. So now I'm going to catch the arithmetic exception, and I'm going to say I'm give myself a little message. Divide by. And then I'm going to do this. Catch array index out of bounds. Error. Array. Error. Let's say it that way. All right. So now. So now if I encounter my divide by 0, my arithmetic exception, I'll catch it here, right? Okay. So builds just fine, it compiles just fine. And if I run, now notice now, sorry. Right? I printed this, then I encountered that arithmetic exception. And I printed out the divide by 0. And then I continued on from there. I didn't go back to here. I didn't go back to here and continue on. I continued on from this point on. Okay. So what if we say, all right, well, do this. And I'm going to run. Right. And so now I got my array error, right? Because the array index out of bounds happened. Okay. All right. And I could do this again. I could run this and I'll get the array index out of bounds again, the array error again. Now I'm going to add one more because I'm going to create a 4th error, but I'm going to do something else. Not there. Okay, I'm I'm going to create an array, an error 4, but this time instead of being one of these known errors, I'm going to throw a new one. I'm going to throw new, let's do illegal argument. I don't think I gotta import it actually. Oh, no, I don't. Okay, good. So what's going to happen now? I'm catching my errors. I'm catching my exceptions. What's going to happen this time? What do you think? What will it display? Will it display Will it display this? Will it display this? Will it display? Oh, yeah. Oh, you're right, Arjun. I didn't comment that out. I just noticed that. Okay. Sorry about that one. We know that error 3, when we run this, yes, it will go ahead and do that array error, won't it? So, okay. Sorry about that one. Let's comment that out. All right. Will it compile? First of all, will it compile? Yes, it compiles. Okay. So now what's going to happen? What do you think? Well, it just compiled, so it can't be a compiler error. I just clicked on compile, and you see down here, it compiled, operation complete. So it can't be a compiler error. That's not an option. What do you guys think? Think it through. Okay, that's one option. So you're thinking the error will be here. It won't get caught in either of these places. So will it just end? Will it just end the program? Let's see. What are you guys saying? In error 4, but no, we'll stop. Right, it won't be caught. Right. So let's see what happens. We run it. Oh, there was an exception. Why? Because we didn't catch it. We're so silly we didn't catch it. All right. So we didn't catch the exception from error 4. So it just ended because we didn't catch these. All right. So sometimes the way we might consider dealing with this problem is we might say, you know what, rather than just continuing on, catch this, catch this, catch this, what if we do this? Okay. what's going to happen here now? I'll show you that this compiles first. Okay, so it compiles. We're fine. So we know we're going to run this line. We know that an error will happen here. It shouldn't be caught here. It shouldn't be caught here. Will it be caught here? And if we run it, let's see. Let's take a look. Yep. So because this was an exception that had not been accounted for, remember, let me go back and share one thing here. I think I closed out the PowerPoint. Let me open it. Where are you? Come on. Let's see. Let's go from here. Okay. I'm going to go back and share that now. I may just share a screen too so I can go back and forth a little bit. All right. So here, remember that illegal argument exception that we threw an illegal argument exception. Right? It is a runtime exception, which is an exception. Remember from last week, we talked about how this inheritance stuff works. A child is the same type as the parent, right? Not the other way around, but since an illegal argument exception is an exception, then it would be caught by the same thing. So if we come over here, we don't even have to do it this way. We could say, catch my runtime. Lowercase t, yep. I can catch a runtime exception and run it, and it'll give me the same output. Okay. This would be a way to catch a general exception. Okay. All right, so what if we said, well, okay, I want to catch any errors. I want to catch even the earlier errors using this general thing. I want any error that happens. Like, so why don't we just take this runtime exception, we're going to remove it from there, and we're going to move it up here, right? We can do that, right? We can do this, can't we? We're just going to catch a runtime exception and do some stuff, and then specifically arithmetic and array index out of bounds. Okay. Let's see what happens when we try to compile this and run this. Ah, compiler error. What happened with a compiler error? Exception, arithmetic exception has already been caught. What? Exception, array index out of bounds exception has already been caught. What do you mean it's been caught? What do you mean it's already been caught? Explain this to me. Somebody who knows. Who knows this? Who knows what's going on here? Because I'll tell you, Java is being really smart here and being very helpful to us. Right, Arjun, you're exactly correct. What the compiler knows is that arithmetic exception is a child of runtime exception. And what that means is that if this runtime exception is caught, right here, if the arithmetic exception is caught here, and handled here, it cannot be caught here, right? Well, is there something we can do about this? Well, what if we tried this? What if we said throw EX? Let's try that. See if that will, because this should work, right? Because what we're saying is catch any old runtime exception and do this with it. But then specifically for arithmetic exception, do something else. Let's see. Let's see if that works. No. Java's not, it's smart. Java's smart, but not smart enough, unfortunately. All right. So if we want to have this kind of thing happen where there's a message that always happens for all exceptions, but we want to have some specific messages based on specific types of exceptions, we'll have to do it the other way around. So we'll have to take this, move it down here. We can do it this way. We could say, you know what, I want to catch my arithmetic exception, tell me what the error was, but then I want to rethrow it and catch it and do something here. So now, if we encounter the arithmetic exception and run it, what? Oh, I can't catch it again in the same block. Unfortunately. That's sad. That's sad. Okay, so what we learned here is that when an exception is caught in here, if it's thrown again, it's thrown outside of all of these catch blocks, unfortunately. Okay, so we can't do that. Oh, well. It would be nice. It would be nice, but it can't happen. Okay, so if we catch it and do that stuff there. All right, so let's see what happens if we have that illegal argument exception. Let's get rid of this runtime exception block. And let's add one more thing. Finally. This should always. Okay. All right. So if we encounter our, I'm gonna start walking through this by debugging this time. Okay. So if we encounter our error 1, we go in here, it's an arithmetic exception. So we display our arithmetic exception information. Then we display the stuff in finally. Then we go outside of the block. Okay. All right. So what if, actually I should put the debug there instead because I know that line's always going to be there. So what if we have our array index out of bounds exception? Okay. We display that. We get our exception, array index out of bounds. We get our array error. We display this. It should always display. And we do some other stuff. All right. Okay. One more. Okay. So now we aren't catching this exception. This is our exception we're not catching. So we display this as an example. We generate an error that will not get caught, but we still do the finally, right? So we didn't catch the exception. We still do the finally. Okay. Will this line get displayed? What do you think? Get 2 votes yes, 3 votes yes, 4 votes yes, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, we got to vote for no. Okay, somebody goes against this. Somebody goes against the grain. Well, Umut, you're either going to be the only one that's right or you're going to be the only one that's wrong. Let's see what happens. Oh, it didn't display. It didn't happen. Congratulations. Oh, and the rest of you guys are coming in the 11th hour. Okay. The reason this didn't display, go back up here, is we never caught the exception, right? We never caught the exception. And so it was still hanging out there. It was still hanging out there, never been caught. And so we needed to skip all lines except for a finally, right, that had not been caught. And so we had to skip all these other lines until it got either caught or stopped the program. Okay, but the finally always executes, always. Okay. Okay. Right. Well, because these are class names, DJ, because these are class names, we must name them exactly as they're named in the class. Okay. All right, let's try one more. Let's do one more, and actually, we'll end there for today. We've had a lot of stuff all at once today. I have all this quotient stuff. I would suggest you look at these in your own time to understand how they work, because the quotient ones are based on divide by 0. Okay, what happens if we try to divide by 0, which we're basically looking at it here using these examples. Okay, let's compile this. So now we don't have any errors. Don't have any errors to deal with. Okay. So we're going to step through. We know we're going to run this line. We know we're going to run this line. Then we do the finally. Because remember, finally always executes, even if an exception happens. And then this final line outside of the block, because we don't have any exceptions that are hanging out there waiting to be taken care of. Okay. I lied. One more. Okay. So now we're going to generate 2 more. I keep coming up with ideas. 2 more. All right. Compile this. So we're going to rethrow the exception. Okay. So we know this is going to execute, so we're going to get this as an example. We know that we're going to encounter the error. We know we're going to display the error divide by 0. Now we're going to rethrow the exception, the same exception as before, the arithmetic exception, which means now we're going to have an exception hanging out there. Will the finally execute? And yes, because the finally always executes. I know you guys, I keep telling you always and never are not true, but this case, there's finally just always executes. All right. So we do that. What about this line? Line 28. Right, there's a hanging exception. I threw the exception, so the exception's hanging out there. So no, line 28 does not execute. Okay, and I said there was two more. This is my second one. All right, so here's my fun one for you. Because remember, I said when there's an exception out there, lines outside after the exception don't execute. So this is going to be a fun one, right? Ooh, let's see if it even compiles, because I've never done this before. Oh, man. Okay. I should have asked you what's going to happen before I click compile. I've never done this before. I never done that before, so I didn't know what was going to happen. All right. Okay, so we got a compiler error. Let's take a look at why. Let's take a look at why, and then we'll end for today. So inside of an exception, we're throwing an exception. Okay. We're throwing an exception. Error unreachable statement. Why? Because inside of this catch block, it knows that if this exception were to get thrown, this line could not happen. Okay. And because the compiler knows that, because Java's trying to be smart, Java's trying to say, I know some stuff. I know some stuff. You can't get to that line. You can't get there from here. All right. So we can't do that. Well, that brings to mind some other ideas. Wait a second. Can I do this? Can I throw new escape? Throw new exception. Let's throw a new arithmetic exception here. Is it going to recognize that this is now an unreachable statement? Let's see. Yep, sure enough. It sure knows. It knows I can't get there. Okay. This would be kind of like, my guess is, I think Java would also recognize something like this as being now an unreachable statement. Yeah, see, same thing. This is an unreachable statement because I can't get there. Yeah. So Java compiler, if you encounter a situation where you put a line of code that makes a statement unreachable, that becomes a compiler error. It says, I know that you can't get to this line and you can't get to this line. And so therefore you can't put something like that in there. But if I can comment it out, then it should compile just fine. Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'll get rid of that and get rid of that. Okay. Okay. So we had a good, nice discussion here about the try, catch, finally, right? You can catch a parent exception type here after you've caught the children first. You can't go the other way with it. All right. If you just wanted to say, you know what, I don't care what kind of exception it is, I just want to do whatever. Okay. Then this would catch all exceptions if this were not commented out. But oftentimes we want to do something different based on a particular type of exception. So maybe if there were an arithmetic exception, I want to do one thing. If there were an array index out of bounds exception, I want to do something else. Okay, so these are ways that we can do that. And notice that I used the same variable name multiple times. Okay, I use the same variable name each time. That's because just like with while loops and if statements and methods and stuff like that, each catch block is considered its own block. And so this EX variable does not exist outside of this block. This EX variable does not exist outside of this block. Okay, so I can use the same variable name multiple times because it means different things. Okay. All right. So like I said, we'll end there for today. Are there any questions before we dismiss? It's a little bit early, I think, today, but that's okay. Again, we're going to do, I'll finish up the assertion talk next week. We won't be able to have a live class next week, so I'm going to record a class so that, and I'll post it next week. But there won't be a live lecture. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. So, all right. What was I saying? Oh, we won't have a lecture next week live. I will post a video lecture. But unfortunately, I have a previous engagement that won't allow me to have class next week. And so I'll record something, which is really sad for me because of the testing discussion. 2.9, yes. So just like I did last semester where you took that grading, like how to calculate grades, and you built and you built and you built and you built on what you had been doing, we're going to do the same thing again here with this university, small tiny university system. I'll add an additional class for the department to the next assignment 2. There will be some relationships between classes that you'll have to make, such as like a department can have courses, a department can have students and teachers. And then what else? Oh, and you'll also have to make your own custom exceptions. So we'll make some custom exceptions that'll be hopefully fun. Okay. All right. Any other questions? So again, I'll try to figure out the best way to tackle this whole quiz situation because some of you guys, there were lots of issues with it today. So we will deal with that over the next week. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend, and I will see you in 2 weeks. You will see me in less than a week on the video lecture, but I will see you in 2 weeks. All right. Have a good afternoon.